you want to buy a JDM, you usually buy the, Toyota Supra, or maybe a 1996 Skyline R34, or maybe R33 or R32, or maybe the modern day R35. Well, today I'll be telling you which is the most overrated JDM cars. Yes, I have said this before my previous video between the Supra and the Skyline, but today, yes, I made a top 10 list of the most overrated JDMs in the world. And yes, many of them are gonna hate me for this, but if it's true, it's true. Sog off. I'm Junior, and you're watching Junior on Cars. Alright, let's get into the video. We start off with the Nissan Skyline GTR R34 to be specific. And as you all know, I have made a video of this between the number 1 and number 2 car, because it's the number 2 car is also a Toyota Supra MK4. And if you have not watched that video, click onto the main channel to go and watch that video. It's very nice. And if you're a JDM fan, stick to this video to learn more. So right, let's get into the Nissan Skyline. Like I said, the price tag of the base model is around $100,000, and you know the base model means not the V-Spec 1 or the V-Spec 2 or the MU NER. If you want the V-Spec 1 or the V-Spec 2 or the MU NER, you're gonna have to throw in an extra $2,000 because it will cost you around $300,000. Well, because the V-Spec 1 and V-Spec 2 and the MU NER are very rare to find, because Nissan didn't make many of them, so you're not expecting to find them very easily. But if you do go to the heart of where they're actually made, which is in Japan, you actually get them much more easier if you go to Tokyo, or maybe Osaka, or whatever those places are in Tokyo. Well, let's get back to the video and let's see what you actually get if you have a V-Spec 2. Well, if you have a V-Spec 2, you have a 2.6 liter turbocharged inline 6. Or if you want to, you can actually get a RB26 DETT engine. And as we all know, the RB26 is a very legendary engine, such as the 2JZ. So I recommend that you have the RB26, because if you can reset the ECU or remap it, in simple terms, you can actually unlock around 700 to 800 horsepower from just playing around with the ECU. Or if you want to, you can just strap a dustbin turbo on, or just a single turbo to give you more power. But let's see how much the RB26 DETT actually produces. Well, it produces around 280 brake horsepower to 293 Newton meters of torque. Or if you want to, the RB26 DET actually produces more than 397 Newton meters of torque if you reset the ECU, like I said. Or if I'm not sure, the 2.6 liter turbocharged engine is the one with the 280 brake horsepower. But what do I know is that the RB26 DET engine actually has 397 Newton meters of torque before you reset the ECU and all that nonsense. But what is the top speed? Well, the top speed is around 155 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 does it under 4.9 seconds. So it's still impressive without the turbos and all that. So it's still a good car to look over if you want a JDM. But I don't think none of these cars here, well, actually many of you will decide which one is your favorite on the comments, so let me know. Let's get into number 2, which is the Toyota Supra MK4. Well, as we all know, the Toyota Supra MK4 is a very legendary car. It has set a trademark for the Mk5. Well, the Mk5 for me is actually a BMW, not a Toyota, because it has BMW chassis, BMW interior, BMW infotainment system, BMW that, BMW engine, and whatever. But the previous one, the MK4, is originally a Toyota car made by Toyota from their hard work. Well, how much will actually that cost you in the USA? Well, to be specific, the Nissan and the Toyota are very rare to find in the US. If you want one, you actually have to get, maybe if someone imported it from Japan and stored it somewhere in a barn. But if you want one strictly, you have to get it, you have to import it from Japan. So it's very rare. But if you do get one for sale, it'll actually cost you more than $100,000, which is equivalent to the base model of the Nissan Skyline R34. So what do you get for 100K? Well, you get a 3 liter sequential turbo straight 6, which produces around 321 brake horsepower to 350 Newton meters of torque. So it's still impressive. Literally, the power is more than the Nissan, but the torque is less than it. So this is why they were Godzilla and David fighting every time, because these were the cars that actually trademarked the JDM in today's standards. So very great, very lucky to have cars like that in our generation to, do many things with them. Well, let's get back to the car. I'm sorry for preaching to you. Well, the top speed of the Supra was around 177 miles per hour when it was, put on a strip to see how much it can push out of itself, but it was limited to around 155 miles per hour. So the original miles per hour was 177, but because of most countries found that very fast, they had to limit the miles per hour to 155 miles per hour, which is the same as the Skyline. But for me, I prefer the 177 miles per hour because it shows the true miles per hour that it actually accomplished, not the one that Toyota told us, which is sort of sussy. But the 0 to 60 is not a lie, which is around 4.7 seconds. Well, the same with the Skyline. If you have an ECU, like I said with the Skyline, you can remap it and you can unlock around 700 to 800 horsepower. But it's a different story if you have a Toyota Supra. Well, the Toyota Supra has a 2JZ engine, which means that if you strap a turbo to it, which is easier to strap a turbo, and if you strap a turbo to it, you can actually accomplish around 1,500 brake horsepower, which is the same as the 2006 Bugatti Veyron. So I mean, if you can strap a turbo and you can go against the Veyron, which off the line is going to be slower, and you have a turbo, which, as we all know, the turbo kicks in the moment you step on the accelerator, I would really choose a Toyota and strap a big turbo to it to just give more performance. Well, let's get into number 3, which is the Mazda RX-7. Yes, as we all know, the RX-7 is very overrated, such as the two cars that I just called out. Well, the RX-7 for me is very stylish, as they call it, rotary, because of its twin-chamber rotary engine, which produces around 237 brake horsepower and around, listen to this, 218 newton meters of torque. So it's still impressive even in today's standards, because that is the same as a Z4 and maybe a Miata or something like that, but it's still more than the same as the 2019 or 2020 Mazda Miata. So it is very impressive, literally, for a car that is extremely old as it is. Well, how much that actually price cost you, which I forgot to mention. If you have the base price, the starting price is around 7,600, which is less than the Skyline and which is less as the Supra. So it's very affordable, but many in our generation do fit turbos to it to give it an extra kick of the line. Well, 7,600 is the starting price, but if you have the top of the range, there was a top of the range one which had all the glooms and glams in it, you would actually pay around 11,770, which is not a lot. Trust me, it is not really a lot. But if you choose the right one, you can actually have more than that. Actually, you can have cotton or whatever on the seat, so it's still good even in today's standards. Well, the top speed is around 120 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 it does it under 5.1 seconds. So it's still impressive even in today's standards, because of in those days it was David and Goliath fighting. But if you check other cars such as the S15, which I'll get into a little bit later, you'll see that more performance are actually in it than the cars that they had between those two, which were the top talking cars in those kind of days. Well, let's get into the 0 to 60, which I forgot to mention, which, wait, I did mention. I am very apologetic for that one. Well, let's get into number 4, which is the Nissan 370Z. Yes, if you don't know the 370Z, the 370Z is just a small car that can look stylish. It's a stylish car that it showed that Japan had style and all that. Well, let's get into the price of it. Well, the price will start off around 333,000. Well, that's if you have the top of the range model, which has all the gadgets and all that nonsense. Well, what does you get for 330k? I mean, 303,000 rand dollars. So my mistake in simple terms. Well, what do you get for that? Well, you get a 3.7 liter V6 engine, which produces around 332 brake horsepower and 270 newton meters of torque. 0 to 60 is also good, 4.5 seconds, and flat out it can do 171 miles per hour without the limiter. So if it's limited, it means it's less than that, but without the limiter it can actually accomplish that much, which for me is very impressive for a car that is that small. So hopefully the roof doesn't fall off. Let's get into number 5, which is the Supra WRX STI. Well, and to be honest, I do love the WRX. It's very good rallying, you know, and all that, but our generation, like I said, fits turbos and whatever's to it, so you can't actually find a proper WRX without being tuned, or maybe get a turbo, or maybe an ECU upgrade, or all that nonsense. Well, if I would have a Supra WRX, I mean, it's nice off-roading. I mean, it's a rally car, literally. As we all know, Subaru I've been saying Supra the whole time. Subaru is actually a company that has been trademarking itself on rally, so it's a rally car that is very good on rally. Actually, it's, if you want a rally car, well, how much will that rally car actually cost you? It'll cost you around $38,000, which is very affordable if you ask me, because that is the equivalent to the Nissan 370, which is, the 370 is a little bit less, but it's still in the category of the 370Z. Well, what do you get for that? Well, you get a 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, which produces around 310 brake horsepower to 290 newton meters of torque, and flat out you can do 174 miles per hour and 0 to 60 under 4.4 seconds. So it's still impressive in today's standards, because it is a modern day car, so it's not as bad as people think it is. Because in my perspective, like I said, I mean, if I have a WRX, it means that I'll be going rallying or all that. Well, let's get into number 6. Well, yes, let's get into number 6, which is the new Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 5 or 6. Well, my mistake, new, not new, the older model, because the Evolution has been stopped, as we all know how that works. Well, how much will the Evolution actually cost you in the US? Well, the Evolution will cost you around $36,000, or if you want to, you can up to the 6 Evolution, which will cost you around $40,000, which is very affordable. But look at it this way, it's still more expensive than the WRX, which both, as we all know, Subaru and Mitsubishi has been doing rallying for a long time, so it is very impressive, I guess, on the price tag, but it's still a bit expensive than both the cars that I mentioned. Well, what do you get for that? Well, you get a 2-liter MIVEC DOHC engine, which produces around 276 brake horsepower to 440 brake horsepower. Well, there's actually the 276 brake horsepower is actually the DOHC 16-valve engine with an inline 4. But if you opt to, you can have a 4B11T i4/T engine, which is a very long number, just like the RB26, which produces around 440 brake horsepower and 525 newton meters of torque. So still impressive, like I said, in today's standards. But the original one, the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, like I said again, our generation just keeps on putting turbos on it. I just feel like turbos are unnecessary on cars that are really unnecessarily needed to have a turbo, because a Subaru, yeah, it's kind of okay, because if you're going rallying, you need more power. But a Supra, okay again, but a Skyline is really unnecessary, because a Skyline is already a performance machine, so I don't really think they need to fit turbos and all that nonsense to the car. Well, let's leave that and let's see how much the 0 to 60 time, which the Evo X actually does under 3.6 seconds, and the Evo 5 does it over 3.8 seconds. So the Evo X does Evo 5 in some, Evo 6 in some terms, does have 2 seconds faster than the Evo 5. So a bit of a difference, I guess, but the top speed is around 142 miles per hour. So whatever evolution you choose, but it doesn't really matter, because both of them trademark the rallying just like the Subaru. So both of them just are perfect rally cars if you want to go rallying. Road cars, I guess, for showing off, but not really for, you know, driving around or cruising around, even though they do have Ricardo seats and soft suspension and all that. But yeah, to be specific, all these cars on the list do have automatic versions, such as the Supra. Well, as you all know, my previous video, I did mention that the Supra actually does have a 4-speed automatic, and you can have a 6-speed manual. Same thing with the Skyline, but the Skyline only has a manual, which is a 6-speed. Well, the other cars don't really have it, but I do think the 370Z does have an automatic version, because the 370Z is sort of current modern, you see, so it does have an automatic version. Well, let's leave that one. Let's go to number 7, which is the Nissan 240 SX, nicknamed the S13. Yes, as we all know, the S13 is a drifter's car in our generation. They put white bodies on it, drop it, and all that nonsense to give you more performance, as they call it. They do fit a turbo to it if they want to. Well, how much is the price tag of that if you want it in the US? Well, in the US, it'll cost you around $14,000, which is less expensive in my opinion, because the S13 is very underrated, even though it is in the overrated category, because it is a bit overrated. But the S13 is kind of underrated and overrated. It's in the middle, because not many do prefer the S13, because the S13, it does, you can fit a turbo and all those stuff that you do the Skyline, but people do prefer the Skyline and the Supra for more performance, and you know, they are overrated anyway, so they are the biggest ones in the category literally on this list. Well, the S13, people who do buy it is actually people who like drifting and all that, because it's a drifter's car in simple terms. Well, let's get back to the car and let's see what engine it gets. Well, it has a 2.4 liter inline 4, and if you want to, in the 1989 you actually had an option of having a Ka24E engine, and in the 89 to the 90s you actually had that engine, but in the later 1990s and the 1998 you actually had a different engine, which was a Ka24DE. Yes, I know there's a difference, because the 1989 didn't have a D and the 1998 had a D, so bit of a difference, even though there is a bigger engine, which is the 2.4 liter inline 4, but it doesn't matter. Well, how much did the 2.4 produce? It produced around 155 miles per hour, 155 brake horsepower, and 160 newton meters of torque. 0 to 60 under 8.1 seconds, and flat out it did it under 235 miles per hour, which is very, very fast than the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 5 and 6. So it is underrated, but it is good on performance. Like I said, most of the cars here do have the same performance as the Skyline and the Supra, so don't really underestimate cars such as the S13, because the S13, even though it's a drifter's car, it can still do its performance very, very well. Well, let's leave that car and let's jump into another Nissan, which is the Silvia S15. Yes, another drifter's car. Literally both cars, S13 and S15, are drifters cars, because I don't know what's with people who drift these cars, because literally the cars here are drifters car, both of them, and also many do turn the 370Z into a drifters car, which is unnecessary. Well, how much will the S15 actually cost you? Well, the S15 will cost you around $14,000. Yes, it is the same as the S13, because the S13 is also $14,000, but only the S13 is $351 extra. Well, the S15 is around $444, so there's a bit of a difference there. So for me, it doesn't make any difference, because if you listen to the stats, you will see they are much more similar. Well, the S13, like I said, had a 2.4 liter, while the S15 didn't have 1 liter. It had a 2 liter DOHC inline 4, but you can opt to also have another 2 liter DOHC turbo 4 inline 4, in my mistake. Or if you wanted to, you can have another engine, which is kind of annoying because there's so many engine options. You can have a 2.1 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. Well, stock power, which was around 250 brake horsepower, but if you had the bigger engine, which was the 2.1 liter, you can actually have around 600 brake horsepower and 700 newton meters of torque if you tuned it. So I prefer calling the tuning numbers, because if you had a tuning number, if you had a tuning engine, you could accomplish more than that, which is ton more power than the S13. Then the S15, because you could, power difference, there's a big one. Well, the top speed is around 145 miles per hour and 0 to 60 under 5.7 seconds. Yes, I know the 0 to 60 time is a bit faster than the S13. Well, literally it is a big gap between the two, but the top speed is less than the S13, because the S13 did it under 235 miles per hour. So performance wise, bit of a difference, I guess so. Well, let's leave that car and let's jump into number 9, which is the Honda S2000. Yes, if you don't know, the S2000 is literally on your screen. It looks directly the same as a Mazda Mx5 Miata. I don't know what was Honda doing, but that is straight on copycat style. The Japanese really did make a mistake there. That is actually a copycat, literally the same car. Well, How much did the S2000 cost? Well, the S2000 cost around $18,000 to $105,000. Yes, the $105,000 one is a bit of an option if you could have the hard top or other options such as that. You could have also a manual and an automatic. Well, the engine is an inline 4 and you could also have a 4-cylinder. So you had two options and two different prices. Well, the horsepower, the 4-cylinder produced around 237 brake horsepower and 162 newton meters of torque. So it was still good on performance. It wasn't down on performance. So it is good compared to the car that I'm going to call it, which is the Miata, which you have to stay tuned to come and listen to, to come and watch if you want to know how much the Miata costs and the engine and all the what is needed. Well, the 0 to 60 did it under 6.8 seconds, and flat out it did it under 163 miles per hour, which is very impressive. Literally, for a car that looks like a worm, it did very, very good. Well, let's get into number 10, the last of the lot. And can you guess what it is? Yes, you have guessed it right. It is the Mazda Mx5 Miata. Yes, if you don't know the current Miata, I'm not going to actually name the current Miata. I'm actually going to call the older one. Yes, the older version from 19 something, I don't know when it was released. Well, the price tag of the old Miata will start off, or it started off at around $27,000 to $40,000. Yes, the $40,000 one is because of there's a hard top and a soft top, and you could have a lot of options added to that. So it is a bit of a expense to it. Well, the engine was a DOHC. I have no idea what is this DOHC engines, because the S15 has it. The many cars have the DOHC. I would think I have to research it and check what it is. Well, the DOHC was an inline 4, which produced around 128 brake horsepower and 149 newton meters of torque. Hold up, wait a minute, some ain't right. How much was it? 162 newton meters of torque for the S2000. So it means the S2000 was more powerful than the Mx5. Well, the Mx5, the older version, is a bit old, like I said. So I don't want to call it the new one, because the new one is not really JDM. Even though it is upgraded, still Mazda and all that. But for me personally, I don't think it is really JDM worthy, because the old Miata had pop-up headlights, because that was actually really cool to have pop-up headlights in the 90s. So, like I said, it has 149 newton meters of torque and 0 to 60 under 10.6 seconds. Yes, I know the 0 to 60 time is a bit slower than the S2000, because the S2000 does it under 6.8 seconds. But the Miata is really overrated than the S2000. Yes, the S2000 mainly do put loud exhaust and all that nonsense. But the Miata is so stylish with that pop-up headlights, just like the Ferrari Testarossa and F40, Countach. All those legendary cars have pop-up headlights. So the S2000, it is a bit modern, but the old Miata just had style, and it was very, very unique in the 90s. So it does win award for that in simple terms. The other top speed is around 109 miles per hour. Yes, I know the top speed is a little bit less than the S2000, because the S2000 does it over 163 miles per hour. But like I said, you can't blame it, because the Miata is very classic. It goes into the Countach and all that kind of style with the pop-up headlights. So it is a bit different compared to the S2000, because the S2000 is a bit modern, and the Miata, the old one, is a bit old. So you see the difference there in simple terms. So yeah. Conclusion is, if you want to choose between those 5 cars that I mentioned, well, it's up to you. But on my perspective, I would choose the 1994, or is it 2000 R34 Skyline. Well, the MU Nerve version, or the V-Spec one, or just the V-Spec 2, or just a normal Skyline, because if it doesn't have a RB26DETT engine, well, it's not my favorite, because I love that engine. It's very nice. You can tune it, you can tune the ECU, you can put turbos, you can do a lot of stuff with it. So it's one of my favorite cars that I would love to have. And also the Toyota Supra MK4, my favorite also. Mitsubishi Lancer, RX7, all those cars on the list are one of my favorites, except the 240SX. I'm not really a fan of the car, but still a good car though. I'm not blaming it. And the 370Z, it's also one of my favorite cars, which I would like use for if I want to go on dirt road or whatever. But if you do like one of them on the list, well, it's up to you, because every JDM car is very special and very interesting to learn from. So yeah, if you want a first car as a teenager, I don't think it's smart to have a JDM. I think a JDM is like a long run car if you have like experienced more cars in your life. So yeah, it's one of my favorites, but it's up to you as teenagers who are mostly gonna watch this video because this is a teenagers video. So yeah. The end of the video, if you want to watch more of my videos, hop onto the main channel to go and watch. And if you like this video, please give it a like. And if you want to learn more about us, hop onto our Instagram page, which is Juno on Cars. Twitter, same story, Juno on Cars.